Disclaimer: the subject matter discussed in this show relates to weapons and other items that have been or could be used in violent acts. The discussion of these items is intended only for education and entertainment. We do not condone or support violent or improper use of any topics discussed in this show. Hello and welcome to Wicked Weapons. This is going to be a little bit of a different episode. We're not really covering a weapon today, but we kind of figured that before we go on to talk about some more weapons, specifically any more firearms, we kind of want to cover some gun safety rules. Some of our audience may be familiar with this, some may not. So for those that don't know, the show is me, Jared, and my stepdad, Matt, and we normally have a third person on with us. But my stepdad has always been really big on gun safety rules, so he, really raised me and my sister up to be very, what word would you use, Matt? I guess respectful of guns.
Yeah. Respectful, educated, not scared, because that almost can sometimes make things worse.
Yeah.
But that comes in with educated aspect of it. I guess you'd say, because that can at least, and like you said, the respect will come into that as well.
Yeah, for sure. In today's episode, we're gonna cover some gun safety rules. Matt, you want to?
Yeah, I always, and Jared's going to get into the traditional list you see, and the number kind of changes from time to time. My biggest speech, and I know we'll get into this at another time, but I'm obviously a stickler, and I get try not to be edgy with people, not being safe with firearms, but because I'm a paraplegic from a gunshot wound that happened when I was 11. And it was the one simple rule that doesn't matter what any of the other rules are. If you follow the one rule, and a lot of people always think, oh, the first rule is make sure it's empty. No. The number one is point in safe direction. Yeah. No matter what happens to the gun, unless it's a catastrophic failure, explosion type thing, as long as you get it pointed in a safe direction, accidental discharge or malfunction, whatever the case may be, until it's time to use it, that's when your other rules can really come into play. But even if it's you find a gun, you see these people, see them on YouTube, like the guys that are fishing, magnetic fishing, and they'll pull up guns out of the creeks and rivers, and they're immediately just swinging these guns around everywhere. Yeah, odds are everything in that. They're most of them so gummed up. Yeah, they got more dirt in them. Nothing. It'd just be a little bomb almost, if anything. But they're
the risk is still there. The potential.
Yeah. And some of them are brand new, and haven't been down there for very long, and a lot of the modern guns that have a lot of resistance coatings and things like that can last a while. So, but you just see them just swinging all around to themselves, to the other camera person or the other magnet guy. It's not, and I'm not ruling out them, but you see that, and a lot of it's just the education, and that one simple rule. And even if you don't know how to unload it, it may be completely foreign to you, and if this is the only thing you ever get out of gun safety, if you were to run across one, that first simple rule, that's it. Point in safe direction, usually down at your feet, or not at your feet, but at the ground in front of you. So worst case, you might have rocks or whatever kick up, blah blah blah, but at least it's not pointed, because once that round goes out, you're responsible for where it goes.
Yeah. So I guess that's a good point for me to get into the 5 basic rules, and these are kind of different based off of whoever's publishing the rules. Like the NRA rules may be different than
another. Yeah, they usually kind of do your a lot of your standards for like concealed carry classes, and
Yeah,
from state to state, it's just kind of their general
yeah. But
guidelines.
usually they're might be a little different, but they're generally kind of similar. But
Hmm.
so rule number one: treat every firearm as if it is loaded. Rule number two: always keep the muzzle pointed in a safe direction. Rule number three: keep your finger off the trigger until ready to shoot. Rule number four: know your target and what's beyond it. Rule number five: secure firearms and ammunition safely. Just looking at these, pretty much the first four are really the ones that you really hammered into me. And but yeah, especially the, like you were saying, rule number two. That one was always really rule number one for us.
Hmm.
I don't know if you want to give just kind of a brief synopsis of what happened to you, because
Yeah.
obviously this is something that Matt and I would really like to cover in an episode a little later on, because he has a very unique story that hopefully other people out there can take from and learn from. But we'll just give you a brief little synopsis today. So,
Yeah. So basically, the it was a family friend and me, and I can never remember what the purpose of this gathering. That was the times like every weekend we're either at my grandma's, or my cousins are there, everybody's there, whatever. That was just normal back then. But we had been doing stuff at the house, and so he was over, and we had been doing what I did growing up was shooting varmints and pest control around the place, and just or soda cans or floating, just constantly we're shooting, and we had been out doing that all weekend. And then basically there was a few little events that happened. He wasn't with the gun, which, like I said, I'll get into details, but it had jammed, and then he was fiddling with it, trying to unjam it, and it went off, and shot me in the back. Bullet went by my spine, T6, T7, which is basically right below your nipples, right about that level. Paralyzed me. Bullet bounced around. It's actually still in my lung. Um, and that was when I was 11. Spent about 3 months in therapy, children's, and some more therapy after that coming home. But it was a major life shock that happened in a matter of seconds, split seconds, from something that easily could have been prevented.
yeah,
And we'll touch on this more, but I'm a firm believer in this. People ask me all the time. I say it in all my paraplegic. I'm in a couple spinal cord injury groups and stuff, and I tell everybody that God had a purpose for allowing it to happen. I know He had a purpose in it, and I have faith. And it's not that He just did this to me. I don't say that, but just that the events leading up to it, and because I've had people that have came to me that have used my experience or my existence, and telling me actually here recently, that led them to become saved. And
yeah,
so it trying not to get too emotional, it hits me sometimes, but it definitely has reached others just from it. And if that was my case between God and my family, I, I'm dealing with it. But not to say that it doesn't affect others. It affects everybody, and I see way, way, way more people just in the spinal cord injury groups. I see the depression, the rates, the especially the older, middler, middle age people that, kids are very resilient and they can learn. And,
Yeah.
adults are set in their ways usually at some point in time. So they have a harder time adjusting,
Yeah.
and understandably so. So it's not just a quick little oops, and then what's even worse, you end up killing somebody. Um,
Well, and I was
you
just
know,
thinking, you saying it was, um, you said it was T6 and T7. Is that
hmm
right? And you were saying
yeah,
it's like just below the nipples. I
nipple
mean
line, yeah,
that.
it's like right at the sternum.
Yeah, I mean that could have hit your heart. Easy,
Oh,
easy.
absolutely, yeah, and yeah, I've looked at that. If it would have went half an inch one direction, it would have missed me. If it would have went a half an inch the other direction, it would have went right through my heart.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, it's
Am I
go ahead.
remembering correctly? So for those that don't know, it was a 22. It was a long rifle. Is that right?
Correct.
So,
Yeah, and I should have. Yeah, and I was. Go ahead. Go ahead. I mean to cut you
uh,
off. Go ahead.
well, no, you're good. So, and this may be what you were gonna say, but it's just a good example of how it's a really underestimated cartridge. Like I was actually just talking to somebody. Uh, I think it was yesterday. Talking to them about just different firearms and stuff, and they were talking about 22 and saying like, oh yeah, that's like nothing. But
hmm Yeah, I get that comment a lot of times in over the years.
it's like you just people just don't realize because yeah, I'll let you kind of cover what's so dangerous about a 22 long rifle because
Yeah,
obviously
I mean,
you
and
know
it
it better than I do. But
right. Well, and it's I mean, you don't want to necessarily say it's underrated, but it's underrated on the damage that it can do inside, and that's because, like I mentioned earlier, that it's still in my left lung. A 22, chances are going inside the human torso isn't going to come back out
yeah,
anywhere. It's going to bounce. It's not an explosive round per se, um,
yeah, and it
but
doesn't have that
it
punch to just go straight through. Um,
right. Well, I mean, it can, but generally no.
yeah,
If it was arm or something like that, but then again, if it hit the bone, no, it's not. So, it's again, then and get into this other times, but it's the shot placement. But yes, I have people all the time. They're like, oh, what's a 22 going to do to you? And I'm like, looky here,
yeah,
without
yeah,
trying to, and would it be your first choice? No, but I know lots of elderly and women that
can't handle
have
the
weak, well,
recoil.
just
You know,
the recoil or just weak grip, and can't load the gun,
yeah,
and usually if they got weak grip, a lot of people will give them a revolver. Well, 38's got a lot of snap to it, and if you
yeah,
don't have good grip control, that's not going to be very beneficial then either. So, but you see a lot do it, and I always, I tell people, and some would disagree, but the gun that you are comfortable with and control is the one you need, not the one you're scared of or can't use, because you're going to end up getting yourself hurt or someone else even more.
yeah. And
Um,
that
so,
actually reminds me of, uh, and I want to say this happened in 2011. So it was right around the time I was about 11 years old, and
hmm
I think it was right around when you and mom were first kind of taking me out to gun ranges and stuff. So in Missouri, there was some kind of gun show or something that this dad took his little boy to, um, and he signed a waiver and everything saying his little boy could shoot this fully automatic Uzi.
hmm I
And
don't. That wasn't actually in Missouri that
that
happened.
that wasn't in
I,
Missouri. Okay.
I
Uh,
don't think so, but they were at a full auto shoot.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I don't. I can't remember, but
For
yeah,
some reason,
I know what you're talking about. But
I thought it happened in
it
Missouri, but I may have got mixed up.
it could be, but I don't. Anyways, that's.
But
But go ahead. Yeah, finish that.
it's really a sad story, because the kid couldn't handle the recoil, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
fully automatic gun, and he's got his finger on the trigger, and I mean the gun just went up, 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 and back.
Mm-hmm.
So I won't get into the nitty gritty, but I mean it's these things you
She
have
ended
to.
up when the little girl that ended up shooting the instructor.
I think that was
Oh, that was a
a
different
different
one.
one. This little boy ended up shooting himself.
Oh,
But
okay. Yeah, the other one. Okay, well then that may be that. Yeah, we're thinking about two different ones. Remember, the one I was talking about was a little girl,
and the
and
instructor was like back over her shoulder.
he, yeah, he just had his hand on her back, thinking, it's just going to kick her back, and
Yeah,
it was like a little Uzi or something, and then it rotated in her hands and ended up killing him,
yeah,
I believe. Um, and that goes back to the respect thing that
yeah.
we were talking about. I mean,
And I
somebody
also
who's
think
never shot a
it's
full auto and recoil it's it's a different animal that some people
well,
aren't
and
ready for.
I think it's something that you and mom actually did a really good job of is judging if you're we can get into a whole debate about this stuff, but
Oh yeah,
if you're going to have your kid shoot a gun, you need to really be aware, and this kind of comes in on, having the parents be educated, and
mm-hmm.
familiar with different calibers and guns. But it's you really need to be aware of what someone at a certain age has the strength
Oh,
and
absolutely.
the knowledge and the respect to be able to handle. Um,
It it infuriates me when I see parents, and I know I did it slightly with you, but I already knew where you were at with the other guns before me and your mom messed with you and we put a I don't remember if it was a 3 or 3.5 inch in my over and under, and didn't tell you about it. Which I've done that to a lot of adults, especially ones that are cocky about it, just to kind of knock, but in not necessarily a joking, but in a joking manner, but actually kind of turning the respect back. That when you get cocky at anything, that's usually when bad things happen.
yeah, yeah,
And but the just like what you were saying, the education and the parents knowing, but it infuriates me when somebody will give a kid, um, you know, not the same aspect as the Uzi or the full auto that happened with the other individuals, but giving them a gun with so much recoil that it's coming out of their hand or beating them up, over
yeah.
recoil to them, and then they're scared for the rest of their life because
Yeah,
they've created you know,
a traumatic
a, P,
experience,
a PTSD. Yeah,
Yeah,
and it happens with adults. I hear it down here all the time, and this again, I can go into this forever, but it goes back to the shot placement of different guns and not having to have the biggest recoiling for everything. But I had a friend down here that was told by somebody wasn't really educated enough. Oh, you've got to have this big recoiling, or this 30-06, and they go out, which 30-06 is a great cartridge. It'll do a lot of things, but they go and buy a really light, cheap plastic Tupperware style stock
yeah, something
shotgun
that's not
rifle that
gonna.
weighs, yeah, it weighs absolutely nothing, and 30-06 has got some recoil. And for someone this is their first time really shooting, besides maybe 22s and pellet rifles and what have you, those things will beat you to death, especially if you don't know how to hold it and manage it. It only takes a handful of times, and then your shots from then on out until you can retrain your brain on the recoil, you're going to flinch and on every gun you shoot from then on out
Yeah,
until you can get that out of your head. and that was some things my dad and them slowly worked up to. And I love recoil. I love big recoil. Always have.
Yeah.
Other people don't, but I'm big enough I can get into it and hold it, and so I'm taking it, but it's not painful like you see a lot of.
Yeah.
And there's some that are just they're meant to make you hurt. You see some of those guys make those giant recoil guns. There's no point to them, but just see who's can hold on to it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
you're not gonna shoot a 2,000 grain bullet at anything.
well, and I was gonna say, you talking about like pulling the little prank, with
Mm-hmm.
the 3.5 inch shotgun shell.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I do think it's important to specify that the difference there is it was not a fully automatic weapon.
Oh
It
yeah,
was
yeah.
just a over and under, so
And
it's,
you only had one round.
yeah, you pull the trigger and it's just that one really hard recoil. And obviously the people were following the gun safety rules at
Oh
that
yeah.
point. So it really was, uh, it really, I don't want to say like a safe prank, but I
Mm-hmm.
mean that's basically what it was. It was,
Right.
and like you were saying, it was to reinforce that respect for, oh, this
Mm-hmm.
this gun just did something I did not expect it to do. You know,
Right.
and so I think that's actually a good segue into kind of talking about some of the different malfunctions that can happen with firearms. If you want to just kind of run us through kind of a general list, and then if there's any that kind of stick out to me, I'll kind of ask some questions.
Yeah. I mean, there's that can go on. Could be, I guess, if depending on how detailed you go into menu or malfunction, but that's where you do get a lot of accidents happening is when a firearm malfunction, especially pistols with the short barrel. It's easy to be sweeping people, which for those who don't mean that you're pointing the barrel, you're swiping across somebody,
Yeah,
because they're shooting, bang, bang, and then all of a sudden click, and ooh, and it gives me chills when I see some of those videos of people like pointing it literally at their face, like, oh,
yeah, they
why,
stop and,
you know,
look down the barrel to see
look down
like,
the
hey, what's
barrel,
the
and
deal?
there's one main one right there that's called a hang fire that the gun didn't malfunction, the primer and powder did, whether the powder had gotten wet or the just primer has a delay in it, and so you pull the trigger, snap, almost like a grenade, so to speak. There's a time delay, and usually, in that type of a safe environment, on a range or out shooting, the general rule, if you pull the trigger and it goes click, but it's not, you take a quick glance and see that, there's not a round stuck in it or stove piped, which is where your brass is just stuck. It didn't fully extract, so it's stuck sticking out like a stovepipe. But then if it just clicks, you don't see anything, sticking out. You'd lay the gun down or hold on to it, pointing it down range. Generally, just hold on to it, point it down range for up 30 seconds is what a lot of people say is a safe number.
Yeah,
And then go to clearing the gun. Now, obviously, in defense situations, you'll have the people argue, you may not have that, and you're right. If it's in a defensive situation and your gun goes click, your second job is get the cover. If not already, then evaluate, your firearm at that point in time. But getting back to the malfunction, I mean, so there, like I said, there could be tons but a lot of them are the first few of hang fires, or just the stovepipe that mentioned, or could even be the magazine, and you can get in different ones for different types of guns. But your main ones are failure to fire, failure to eject.
Yeah.
That's your main malfunction.
So if you had,
Or failure to go into battery, I guess would be, in the failure to fire, failure to eject, and failure to feed.
yeah. So I guess if you had, just for those three different categories, what would you say for each one, kind of what your general guideline is as to what to do? I know you kind of just touched on it a little bit already,
Right.
but so, like, say, failure to fire, you know, what do you do?
First thing is just a visual exam, just real quick. You're looking at it, and again, it depends on your situation. Are you just setting at a range, statically shooting? If you're just setting at a range and it goes click, just hold on to it. Count in your head to at least 15, 20, up to
Yeah.
30 seconds if you want to feel
And
comfortable.
so the
Then
whole
start
time,
investigating it. Whole time pointing downrange
right?
at your
Okay.
target, or if you could just, if you're usually if you're an indoor range person, you don't want to be pointing at the ground. Just keep pointing it down at their collection system, whatever they use.
Yeah, because pointing at the ground, usually the
It's all
indoor range
concrete.
is concrete, and you have the
Yeah,
ricochet potential.
yeah, you'll have correct. But if you're outside, that you could just point it at the ground if you wanted to. But to always, a lot of people just keep holding on to it, because if it's a big recoiling gun and you've just you lay it down, the gun goes off with the recoil. You're not holding the recoil. The gun's going somewhere too. So, then what happens? It's pointed at somebody else, then it just saves things. Just hold on to it
Yeah,
until that time is expired.
yeah,
That's if you're on the range. Defense situation, that's a whole different animal. We don't want to get into that.
yeah,
But in
yeah.
a
That's a
standard
whole.
practicing, hunting, just, just your normal, um, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but just your normal practice shooting, range time, developmental. That's what happens on number one. Then you go into evaluating what is that failure. So to give just a brief, and like I said, we'll get into it bigger, but from what I was told, um, the individual who had shot me had been shooting the rifle. It was an older Marlin lever action. It was leaned up, and I was shooting. He had went to the house, came back, and he had looked and noticed that the gun had stovepiped. And again, that means that he basically opened it and cycled it like, because it was a lever action. He racked it like he was to reloading, but it didn't fully kick out the empty. And so when he closed it back, that empty was sticking out of the action a little bit. But he didn't notice that when he shot and reloaded. Went up to the house, did whatever, came back, noticed it, picked the gun up, levered it just enough to clear out that, and when he closed the lever, he bumped the trigger with his finger. So his finger was in the trigger guard when he closed the lever action.
Yeah,
And those back in the day, I mean, you could almost hold the trigger down and just work the lever. There wasn't the safeties you have in some of them now. But either way, I mean, you can close them and still bump a lever if you want to. And that's what he did, and caused the gun to go off and my life to change.
yeah,
But yes, so I mean, that's the number one. If you're shooting and you have that malfunction, just keep it pointed down range and then evaluate. And if you're not comfortable with it, this is your first time, then set it down and have whoever hopefully is there teaching you or guiding you or whatever, let them inspect it. Because
yeah.
if you just go to poking and prodding and pulling, then you might cause it to go off again, just not thinking.
Right.
Again, education.
Yeah, for sure. And and it's familiarity too, because
Oh, absolutely.
for for us, we shoot on a fairly regular basis, so we
Mm-hmm.
encounter jams and stuff like that. Uh, Probably more often than the usual person that hunts once a year or twice a year. You know,
Well, and
um,
that's probably 60-70% of the firearms that are brought to our business, is the guns malfunctioning or won't load,
yeah,
won't whatever. And hate to say it, there's a lot of times when I see the scariest story. When we don't, I don't want to, roll anybody out, but you have the ones, it it did whatever, or it didn't fire or didn't whatever, and the gun's still fully loaded and just
yeah.
brought into a store or
Or
wherever, and it's like, oh,
they
it
come
just
in and
it,
they're like, "Hey, you don't have to unload this or anything. It's already unloaded."
yeah,
And
right,
start
yeah,
looking at it, and um, this is another one. As far as like rule number one, treat all guns as if they're loaded. That's
mm-hmm,
why that rule exists, is because sometimes somebody will hand you their gun and say,
mm-hmm,
"Hey, it's empty. Don't worry about it." But
yeah,
you have to
yeah, no,
check yourself,
absolutely,
to know
because
for
you're now
yourself.
responsible for that firearm.
Right,
If it
right.
goes off and it's in your hands, it's all you. Um,
Um, so yeah, I think we did a pretty decent job of uh, kind of going over some things as far as firearm safety, and again, just to reiterate, um, we um, I'm I feel confident in speaking for Matt on this as well, but I personally didn't want to go any further doing the wicked weapons thing and talking about firearms. We've got that disclaimer, but I personally feel like there's a lot of misinformation.
oh,
People
100%.
people just not being educated enough on
Yeah.
firearms. So I personally feel like it's good for us to just take a minute and say, hey, let's just do a short little video, a short little recording, and get some of these basics out of the way. Um,
And I tell everybody, or I try to, especially uncomfortable or don't want, it's educate yourself. If you're not comfortable with them, then don't have one. That's completely fine. That's your right as well. But educate yourself, because you might come in contact with one
yeah,
at some point in time, and don't always just go by what your neighbor told you
yeah.
or whatever. Get some education. I mean, there's free classes, that can give you some basic rules.
I do feel like it's important for us being advocates for them, that we make it clear to people like, hey, we don't the gravity of what these can do is not lost on us,
No.
especially not on you. And I think as my final statement here before we kind of end this, I think if anybody takes something away from this, and specifically your life story, I just hope that they take away the fact that when something like this goes wrong, you can overcome it, and you know, I really um, take a lot of inspiration from the fact that, this happened to you, and I'm going to have to try and not get emotional here. Uh, but this happened to you, and you didn't write it off and say, like, I'm never touching one again in my life. You
Mm-hmm.
almost took it
Mm-hmm.
more the opposite direction of like, okay,
Yeah.
I want to make sure this doesn't happen to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
that's a big part of why I kind of want to. I really, really hope and pray that this will get out to a lot more people. A lot more people can hopefully be informed just from your story, and maybe um, we can maintain our rights to have
Mm-hmm.
guns, but also just be educated
Yeah.
while we're doing it. So,
Yeah.
um, but I'm gonna get off my soapbox and let you kind of
No,
say
no,
some stuff.
I mean, and yeah, I'd have to keep mine. I'm trying to keep mine because, like I said, we're going to go into hopefully, at some point in time more of the story, and I've definitely caught that before. People are like, "Oh, you were shot in an accident, and you like guns?" I'm like, "Yeah, I love them." That's I just, and it's not just them; it's the working science of them. But either way, it's that I didn't take the negative and completely push it off that they're all bad, and because they're not, it's the person that's holding it. And like you mentioned with today's world, and I mean, I could totally side with those that have had horrific events from 'em. Obviously from mine, whether no, I wasn't, obviously wasn't killed, but it was a life-changing traumatic event.
Yeah,
But that is a price that you're going to pay to have the freedoms that we have. There was somebody, and they put it way better than this, but that, not that there's no like good way of any and all things that we have, um, good come at a price. Unfortunately,
yeah,
I know that
yeah,
um, sounds weird, for, or I guess I should say, for our earthly things come from a price from us. We can
yeah.
get into that
Well,
another topic, right?
well,
But
I mean, even for those that don't know, we are Christian,
absolutely,
but I mean, even our salvation did come at a price.
come at a price, right?
Jesus did have to come and die for our
Absolutely.
sins. And actually, that's a good segue into you talking about uh, God letting that happen to you for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, you know, people often have trouble reconciling. Why did this bad thing happen
Mm-hmm.
to me? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why would God let this happen? And it's really because when you lean further into Him, it becomes uh, part of your testimony. Um,
Oh yeah.
and you can use it for His glory. And also, I mean, it has an impact on other people. For people who are listening, thank you for listening. And if you have any questions as far as firearm safety, just please feel free to comment. Just ask us any questions that you may have, and we would love to answer you. And we would love to educate people on that. And uh,
And we're by all means not the end all be all, and I'm the first to admit if I don't know something, I'll tell you I
yeah,
don't know, but I'll find out. So I mean, there's people that know way more on it. I learn stuff every day in this industry, so
yeah, for sure.
it's you're always, as long as you're willing to you know keep an open mind and learn from it, um, all of it, and like I said, respect it. It's it can be a lot of fun, and not a scary thing.
So yeah, for all of our listeners, we will get back to our usual talking about crazy, uh, wild, wicked weapons from history. So uh, just stay tuned with us, and if you don't like this up, just stick around, and we'll have some more weapons coming down the pipeline. But if you're into this show, if you like it, please like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Thank you.